Chapter 1. The Anniversary Lie. The champagne flute trembled slightly in Emily's hand, the delicate crystal threatening to spill its precious contents. Across the table, David smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that used to send shivers down her spine. Tonight, however, it felt rehearsed, mechanical, like a performance. "Happy 10th anniversary, my love," he said, raising his glass in a toast. "To many more years of happiness together." Emily forced a smile and clinked her glass against his. "To many more," she echoed, the words feeling hollow on her tongue. 10 years, a decade. It felt like a lifetime, and yet in so many ways, it felt like they were further apart than ever before. The restaurant was buzzing with the murmur of conversations and the clinking of silverware. Soft jazz played in the background, creating a romantic ambiance that felt increasingly artificial. Emily glanced around, noticing other couples holding hands, whispering sweet nothings, and gazing into each other's eyes with genuine affection. A pang of envy shot through her. When was the last time David had looked at her like that? She took a sip of champagne, the bubbles tickling her nose. It was a Dom Perignon, David's favorite. He always spared no expense when it came to anniversaries. The problem wasn't the gestures, it was the lack of genuine connection behind them. The presents were lavish, the dinners extravagant, but the intimacy was gone. The spark had fizzled out, leaving behind a dull ache of loneliness. "How was your day, honey?" David asked, reaching across the table to take her hand. His touch felt cold, impersonal. "Fine," she replied, pulling her hand away gently. "Busy." She hated lying, but it had become a necessary part of her life. The truth was far too complicated, too painful to articulate. Her day had been anything but fine. It had been a whirlwind of stolen moments, hushed phone calls, and secret rendezvous. A day spent wrapped in the intoxicating embrace of Alex. They had met at an art gallery opening a few weeks ago. David, predictably, had been unable to attend, citing a last-minute business meeting. Emily had gone alone, feeling a familiar sense of resentment bubbling inside her. It was there, amidst the swirling crowd and abstract canvases, that she had met Alex. He was an artist himself, his eyes alight with passion and creativity. He had introduced himself with a disarming smile and a genuine interest in her thoughts on the artwork. They had talked for hours that night, discussing everything from art and literature to their hopes and dreams. It was a conversation that felt effortless, natural, a stark contrast to the stilted exchanges she had with David these days. Since then, they had been meeting in secret, stealing moments whenever they could. Lunches in hidden cafes, walks in the park, whispered phone calls in the dead of night. Each encounter deepened their connection, blurring the lines between friendship and something more. The attraction was undeniable, a magnetic pull that neither of them seemed able to resist. Yesterday, the something more had become reality. The memory of their first kiss flooded her senses, a wave of heat washing over her. It had been electric, passionate, a culmination of weeks of pent-up longing and unspoken desires. She had known it was wrong, that she was playing with fire, but the temptation had been too strong. She had surrendered to the moment, losing herself in the intensity of his embrace. Now, sitting across from her husband on their 10th anniversary, the guilt was almost unbearable. The champagne tasted like ash in her mouth. "Anything interesting happen at work?" David pressed, oblivious to her inner turmoil. Emily forced herself to focus. "Just the usual," she said. "The Miller account is still a mess. I spent most of the day trying to sort it out." It wasn't a complete lie. She did work, but she'd spent a good portion of the afternoon messaging Alex, arranging their next meeting. The thrill of anticipation warred with the gnawing guilt. The waiter arrived with their appetizers, a beautifully arranged plate of oysters on the half-shell. David dug in enthusiastically, while Emily picked at hers, her appetite gone. "These are delicious," David said, smacking his lips. "You should try one." "I'm not really in the mood," she replied, pushing the plate away. David frowned. "Are you feeling all right? You seem a bit off tonight." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Was he suspicious? Could he sense her deception? She forced herself to meet his gaze, trying to appear calm and composed. I'm just tired, she said. It's been a long week. David seemed to accept her explanation, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her, studying her. She knew she couldn't keep this up for long. The lies were starting to weigh her down, threatening to suffocate her. The main course arrived, and they ate in silence for a while, the only sound the clinking of silverware and the murmur of the restaurant. Emily found herself staring at David, trying to reconcile the man she loved with the man he had become. He was still handsome, still successful, but he was also distant, preoccupied. Forcing a smile. I love you too, David, she whispered, the words a painful reminder of the chasm that had grown between them. As they left the restaurant and stepped out into the cool night air, Emily knew that her life was about to change, irrevocably and forever. Chapter 2. A chance encounter at the gallery. The gallery hummed with a low, sophisticated energy. Champagne flutes clinked, conversations buzzed, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and unspoken intentions. Emily usually enjoyed these events, but tonight, she felt out of place, a solitary figure adrift in a sea of couples and art aficionados. David had bowed out at the last minute, as he so often did, leaving her to navigate the social scene alone. She wandered through the exhibits, pretending to be engrossed in the abstract paintings and sculptures, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about David, about their increasingly strained relationship, and about the growing sense of emptiness that had taken root in her heart. The gallery owner, a flamboyant woman with a cascade of fiery red hair, greeted her with a warm smile. Emily, so glad you could make it. David couldn't join us tonight? Emily forced a smile. He had a last-minute business meeting, she explained, reciting the familiar excuse. The gallery owner raised an eyebrow, a knowing look in her eyes. Of course, she said, her voice laced with a hint of skepticism. Well, enjoy the show. We have some truly exceptional pieces this evening. Emily nodded and continued her exploration of the gallery, trying to shake off the feeling of being pitied. She stopped in front of a large, abstract canvas, a riot of colors and textures that seemed to mirror her own inner turmoil. Interesting, isn't it? A voice said beside her. Emily turned to see a man standing next to her, his eyes fixed on the painting. He was tall, with dark, tousled hair and a warm, engaging smile. He exuded an air of confidence and creativity that was instantly captivating. I'm not sure what to make of it, Emily admitted, feeling a blush creep up her neck. That's the beauty of abstract art, the man replied. It's open to interpretation. It's about feeling, not necessarily understanding. They stood in silence for a moment, both gazing at the painting. Emily felt a strange connection to this stranger, a sense of understanding that she hadn't felt in a long time. I'm Alex, he said, extending his hand. Alex Moreau. Emily, she replied, shaking his hand. Emily Carter. They continued to talk about the painting, about art, about life. Emily found herself drawn to Alex's intelligence, his passion, and his genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. He listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and offering insightful observations. It was a conversation that flowed effortlessly, a breath of fresh air in the stale atmosphere of her marriage. As the evening progressed, they moved from one exhibit to another, their conversation deepening with each passing moment. Emily found herself opening up to Alex in a way that she hadn't done with anyone. Not Maybe we could do it again sometime, he suggested, his eyes twinkling. She knew that seeing Alex again would be dangerous, that it would complicate her life in ways she couldn't even imagine. But the thought of not seeing him again was unbearable. I'd like that, she said, her voice barely audible. They exchanged numbers and Emily drove home, her mind racing. She knew that she was playing with fire, that she was on the verge of making a terrible mistake. But she couldn't deny the pull she felt towards Alex, the hope that he represented, the possibility of finding happiness again. As she pulled into her driveway, she saw David's car parked in the garage. He was home early. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the charade that awaited her. She walked into the house, forcing a smile as she greeted David. "How was your meeting?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Long and boring," he replied, his eyes fixed on the television. "How was the gallery?" "It was fine," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Some interesting pieces." She didn't mention Alex. She couldn't. The thought of sharing that part of her evening with David felt like a betrayal, not only to him, but also to herself. She went to bed that night, her mind filled with thoughts of Alex. She knew that she shouldn't see him again, that it was wrong, that it would only lead to heartbreak. But she couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement, a flicker of hope that had been dormant for far too long. She closed her eyes, imagining his smile, his touch, his voice. She knew that she was playing a dangerous game, but she couldn't resist the temptation to explore the possibilities that lay ahead. She had met someone who saw her, someone who understood her, someone who made her feel alive again. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was finally ready to take a chance on happiness, no matter the cost. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Dark. The rain lashed against the windows of Emily's office, mirroring the tempest brewing inside her. She stared at the computer screen, the numbers blurring into an indistinguishable mess. She couldn't focus. All she could think about was Alex. Their coffee date last week had been even more intoxicating than their first meeting. They had talked for hours, their conversation flowing effortlessly from art to music to their deepest fears and desires. She had learned about his struggles as an artist, his passion for social justice, and his deep sense of empathy for others. He, in turn, had listened intently as she confided in him about her dissatisfaction with her marriage, her unfulfilled dreams, and her growing sense of isolation. He had held her hand across the table, project. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. As she drove to the restaurant, she felt a mixture of excitement and dread. She knew that she was on the verge of making a life-altering decision, that she was playing with fire, that she could lose everything. But she couldn't deny the feeling that she was finally living again, that she was finally taking control of her own destiny. Alex was waiting for her at the restaurant. A small, intimate place with dim lighting and checkered tablecloths. He stood up as she approached, his eyes lighting up with a warm, welcoming smile. "Emily," he said, his voice soft, "you look beautiful." Emily blushed, feeling a surge of warmth wash over her. "Thank you," she replied. "So do you." They sat down at a cozy table in the corner, their knees almost touching. The waiter took their orders and they began to talk, their conversation flowing easily and naturally. They discussed their dreams, their fears, their passions. Emily told Alex about her struggles with her marriage, her feeling of being trapped and unfulfilled. Alex listened intently, offering words of support and understanding. "You deserve to be happy, Emily," he said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "You deserve to be with someone who appreciates you, who loves you for who you are." "I don't know if that's possible," Emily replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been married for 10 years. I have a life, a home, a reputation. I can't just throw it all away." "I'm not asking you to throw anything away," Alex said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I'm just saying that you deserve to be happy. And if you're not happy in your marriage, then you have to ask yourself what you're willing to do about it." Emily looked into his eyes, seeing a genuine concern and compassion. She knew that he was right, that she couldn't continue living this lie, that she had to make a decision. After dinner, Alex walked her to her car. The rain had stopped, and the city lights twinkled in the darkness. They stood in silence for a moment, the tension between them palpable. "I had a wonderful time tonight, Emily," Alex said, his voice soft. "Me too," she replied, her heart pounding in her chest. He leaned in closer, his breath warm on her face. She closed her eyes, anticipating his kiss. His lips met hers gently at first, then with increasing passion. She surrendered to the moment, losing herself in the intensity of his embrace. The kiss lasted for what felt like an eternity. When they finally broke apart, Emily was breathless. "I shouldn't have done that," she said, her voice trembling. "It can't wait. We need to talk about this now." He reluctantly put down the newspaper and turned to face her. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice laced with impatience. Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for the difficult conversation ahead. "I don't think we're happy, David," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think we've been happy for a long time." He stared at her, his eyes widening in disbelief. "What are you talking about? Of course we're happy. We have everything we could ever want." "That's not true, David," she said, her voice rising. "We have a house, a car, a comfortable life, but we don't have love. We don't have passion. We don't have each other. He stood up, his face flushed with anger. What is this about, Emily? Are you seeing someone else? The question hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She knew that she should deny it, that she should protect herself and her secret, but she couldn't lie anymore. Yes, David, she said, her voice trembling. I'm seeing someone else. His face contorted with rage. Who is it? He demanded. Who is he? Tell me. Emily flinched, recoiling from his anger. It doesn't matter, David, she said. What matters is that I'm not happy with you. I haven't been happy for a long time. He stared at her, his eyes filled with hurt and betrayal. I can't believe this, he said, his voice cracking. I thought we had something special. I thought we were happy. So did I, David, she replied, tears streaming down her face. But we're not, and I can't pretend anymore. A long silence fell between them, broken only by Emily's sobs. David stared at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. I need you to leave, he said, his voice cold. I need you to pack your things and get out of my house. Emily's heart sank. She had expected anger, she had expected accusations, but she hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to ask her to leave. David, please, she said, reaching out to him. Can't we talk about this? Can't we try to work things out? He recoiled from her touch, his face hardening. There's nothing to talk about, he said. Get out. Emily stared at him, her eyes filled with despair. She knew that she had made a mistake, that she had hurt him deeply. But she couldn't go back. She had to move forward, even if it meant losing everything. She turned and walked out of the living room, heading towards the bedroom to pack her things. As she half expecting, half dreading a call from David. The image of his hurt, betrayed face haunted her dreams. One evening, as they sat on their terrace, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, Alex reached for her hand. You seem distant, he said, his brow furrowed with concern. Is everything all right? Emily hesitated. It's just David, her voice barely audible. I can't help but wonder how he's doing. Alex sighed, his hand tightening around hers. You can't keep looking back, Emily, he said gently. You made a choice.
You need to focus on the present, on us. She knew he was right, but the guilt was a relentless companion. She tried to push it aside, to immerse herself in the moment.
In the warmth of Alex's embrace. Later that night, under a sky ablaze with stars, they made love, their bodies moving together in a desperate attempt to silence the doubts and fears that lingered between them. But even in the heat of passion, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was living a lie, that their stolen moments were built on a foundation of broken vows and shattered trust. Chapter 6, The Letter Left Unsent. The pristine white desk in their Santorini villa mocked Emily. She'd bought a beautiful journal and a fancy pen, determined to pour her heart out in a letter to David, to explain the unexplainable, to somehow make him understand. Days had passed, and all she had was a crumpled mess of discarded pages and a growing sense of futility. She started, "Dear David," but it felt hollow, impersonal. She tried, "I'm so sorry," but the words seemed inadequate, a pathetic attempt to minimize the immense pain she'd inflicted. She wanted to explain how the years had chipped away at their connection, how his ambition had eclipsed their intimacy, how she'd felt invisible, unheard. She wanted to tell him about the loneliness that had gnawed at her, the yearning for a spark that had long since faded. But how could she justify her actions? How could she explain the pull she felt towards Alex, the intoxicating feeling of being seen and desired? She wrote about the art gallery, about their first conversation, about the way Alex had looked at her like she was the most fascinating woman in the world. She described the stolen lunches, the whispered phone calls, the forbidden kisses that had ignited a fire within her. But as she wrote, she realized that she was only making excuses, trying to absolve herself of guilt. The truth was, she had made a choice. She had crossed a line. She had become like a trophy wife, an accessory to his success. Sarah listened patiently as Emily recounted the events of the past few months, from her meeting with Alex to their affair, to her confession to David. As she spoke, she could see the shock and judgment in Sarah's eyes. "I don't understand, Emily," Sarah said finally. "How could you do this to David? He loved you. He would have done anything for you." "I know," Emily said, tears welling up in her eyes, "and that's what makes it so hard. But I wasn't happy, Sarah. I needed something more. I needed to feel alive again." "And you think sleeping with another man was the answer?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. "No," Emily admitted, "but it was a wake-up call. It made me realize that I couldn't continue living a lie. I had to make a change, even if it meant hurting David." "And what about Alex?" Sarah asked. "Do you really think this is going to last? You're on vacation. You're running away from reality. You're going to come back home, and this is just going to burst." "What about that?" Their voices escalated, the beauty of the Santorini sunset lost in the rising tension. Sarah accused Emily of being selfish and reckless, of throwing away everything she had for a fleeting infatuation. Emily defended her choices, arguing that she had a right to be happy, even if it meant breaking hearts along the way. The conversation ended with Sarah storming off to her room, leaving Emily alone on the terrace, feeling more isolated than ever. She had hoped that Sarah would understand, that she would offer her support. But instead she had only confirmed her worst fears, that she was a terrible person, a homewrecker, a disgrace. Chapter 8. Shattered Vows. David stared at the half-empty bottle of whiskey on the coffee table, its amber liquid shimmering in the dim light. The apartment felt cavernous without Emily's presence, each room echoing with the ghost of her laughter, her touch, her scent. He hadn't left the house in days, hadn't showered, hadn't shaved. He was a shadow of his former self, a successful lawyer, reduced to a pathetic recluse. He replayed the conversation with Emily over and over in his head, each word a fresh wound. Yes, David, I'm seeing someone else. He couldn't understand it. He had given her everything she could ever want. A beautiful home, a lavish lifestyle, a secure future. He had worked tirelessly to provide for her, to make her happy. And this was how she repaid him? With betrayal? He poured himself another drink, the whiskey burning its way down his throat. He thought about Alex, the man who had stolen his wife, the man who had shattered his life. He imagined confronting him. The price of deception. The glow of Santorini was a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of life back home. The apartment Emily and Alex found was small, cramped, and a far cry from the spacious suburban house she'd shared with David. The initial excitement had faded, replaced by the nagging anxieties of everyday life. Emily applied for job after job, but her reputation preceded her. Whispers followed her. Did you hear about Emily Carter, the one who left her husband for an artist? She could feel the judgment in their eyes, the subtle rejections that stung more than any outright denial. Her savings dwindled with each passing week, and the weight of financial insecurity pressed down on her. Alex's art career wasn't faring much better. The scandal surrounding Emily had made potential clients wary. His exhibitions were sparsely attended, and sales were slow. He grew increasingly frustrated, his artistic temperament flaring up in angry outbursts. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of job searching, Emily returned home to find Alex pacing the floor, his face flushed with anger. "This is your fault," he shouted. "If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be in this mess. My career is ruined." Emily recoiled, hurt and anger surging through her. "How dare you say that?" she retorted. "I didn't ask you to ruin your career. I didn't ask you to leave your life behind. I made my own choices." Their argument escalated, fueled by resentment and desperation. They hurled accusations at each other, dredging up old insecurities and long-held resentments. The small apartment felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with bitterness and regret. As they stood there, facing each other in the harsh glare of the kitchen light, Emily realized that their relationship was crumbling under the weight of their shared deception. The passion and excitement that had initially drawn them together had been replaced by a toxic mix of guilt, blame, and disappointment. The price of their affair was far higher than either of them had imagined. Chapter 10, Rebuilding Trust. Emily sat on the worn leather couch in Dr. Lee's office, twisting a tissue in her hands. The therapist's calm, non-judgmental gaze offered a small measure of comfort in the swirling chaos of her life. "So, Emily, tell me what's been on your mind this week," Dr. Lee said gently. Emily sighed. "Everything," she said, her voice cracking. "I feel like my life is falling apart. I can't find a job. My relationship with Alex is strained, and I'm still haunted by what I did to David." "It sounds like you're carrying a lot of guilt," Dr. Lee observed. "I am," Emily admitted. "I hurt David. I destroyed our marriage. I betrayed his trust." "And why did you do it, Emily?" Dr. Lee asked. Emily hesitated, struggling to articulate the complex emotions that had driven her actions. "I wasn't happy," she said finally. "I felt invisible, unfulfilled. I needed something more." "And you thought Alex could give you that?" Dr. Lee asked. "I don't know," Emily said. "Maybe I just wanted to feel alive again. Maybe I was looking for an escape." Dr. Lee nodded. "It sounds like you were looking for something outside of yourself to fill a void within you," she said. "But true happiness comes from within, Emily. It comes from accepting yourself, forgiving yourself, and taking responsibility for your own life." Over the next few months, Emily continued to see Dr. Lee, delving deeper into the underlying issues that had led to her infidelity. She explored her childhood experiences, her insecurities, and her patterns of behavior. She realized that she had a tendency to seek validation from others, to rely on external sources for her happiness. Meanwhile, Alex also started attending therapy, prompted by Emily's urging and his own growing sense of unease. He confronted his own insecurities, his fear of commitment, and his tendency to sabotage his relationships. He realized that he had used Emily as a muse, a source of inspiration, rather than truly loving her for who she was. Slowly, gradually, both Emily and Alex began to take responsibility for their actions and their own healing. They learned to communicate more openly, to express their needs and feelings without resorting to blame or anger. They started to rebuild trust, both with themselves and with each other. But the road ahead was long and uncertain. Chapter 11. The Ghost of What Was. The invitation arrived weeks before the event. A thick cream card with elegant script, announcing the wedding of a mutual friend, Sarah's cousin. Emily almost threw it away, but a part of her, a morbid curiosity perhaps, made her RSVP yes. The wedding was held at a grand estate just outside the city, a picturesque setting that felt both familiar and alien to Emily. She recognized many of the faces in the crowd, friends and acquaintances from her former life. They greeted her with polite smiles and wary glances, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and disapproval. As she mingled awkwardly, she couldn't help but scan the room, searching for a familiar figure. And then she saw him. David was standing by the bar, talking to a group of men. He looked different, thinner, more weary. His eyes, usually so bright and confident, were clouded with sadness. They hadn't spoken since their acrimonious split. Emily felt a pang of guilt as she watched him, remembering the happy times they had shared, the dreams they had built together. She wondered if he hated her, if he still felt the same pain and betrayal that she had inflicted upon him. Throughout the evening they avoided each other, circling each other like wary animals. Emily watched David from afar, noticing his forced smiles, his strained conversations. She sensed that he was just as uncomfortable as she was, just as haunted by the ghost of what was. As the night drew to a close, Emily found herself standing alone on the terrace, gazing out at the twinkling lights of the city. She felt a presence behind her, and turned to see David standing there, his expression unreadable. "Emily," he said softly, his voice barely audible. "David," she replied, her heart pounding in her chest. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history hanging heavy in the air. "You look good," David said finally, breaking the silence. "So do you," Emily replied, offering a weak smile. They exchanged a few more polite words, small talk about the weather. But beneath the surface of their mundane conversation, Emily sensed a deeper current of emotion, a lingering connection that refused to be extinguished. Chapter 12. Facing the Mirror. Months after that wedding, sitting in a coffee shop alone, Emily studied her own face. The reflection revealed more than physical appearance, but her soul. It was time to be brutally honest. In therapy, she had always focused on David's failings and how Alex was different. And while these things held elements of truth, it was time to take ownership for the pain she caused. No, David was not perfect and was often absent, but she never did attempt to communicate that with him. She always kept a smile on her David and Alex, and turned the forgiveness inward towards herself. She was not going to be a victim of her own life, but a survivor. Chapter 13, A Second Chance. A few weeks after her breakthrough, an unexpected email arrived. It was from David. "Emily, I know this is out of the blue. I was hoping we could talk. I understand if you are not wanting to, but I believe we could find closure. I've been doing therapy as well, and have been dealing with my own demons. There is much to say. If you are willing, can you meet me for lunch next week?" Emily stared at the email, her hands trembling. Part of her wanted to delete the message, to bury her head in the sand, and pretend that David didn't exist. But another part of her, a flicker of hope perhaps, urged her to respond. She took a deep breath and typed a reply. "David, I'm surprised to hear from you. But yes, I'm willing to talk. Lunch next week sounds fine. I'll leave it to you to decide the location." Emily. The week leading up to the lunch was filled with anxiety and anticipation. Emily replayed their conversations in her head, rehearsing what she wanted to say, what she wanted to ask. She knew that this was a pivotal moment, a chance to finally put the past behind them. The restaurant David chose was a quiet, unassuming cafe in a neutral part of town. As Emily walked in, she saw him sitting at a table by the window, his face etched with nervousness. They greeted each other with a cautious hug, their bodies stiff and awkward. They sat down and ordered their food, a silence between them heavy and uncomfortable. "So," David said finally, breaking the silence, "how have you been?" "I've been okay," Emily replied, forcing a smile. "Trying to rebuild my life." "I'm glad to hear that," David said. "I've been doing the same." They talked about their therapy, about their struggles, about their hopes for the future. They avoided talking about Alex, about the affair, about the pain that had driven them apart. But as the conversation deepened, they began to open up, to share their feelings, to express their regrets. David admitted that he had been too focused on his career, too neglectful of Emily's needs. He acknowledged that he had contributed to the breakdown of their marriage. Emily, in turn, apologized for her infidelity, for the pain she had caused him. She explained that she had been lost, confused, and desperate for something more. As they talked, Emily realized that they had both changed, that they had both grown. "Thank you for everything, and thank you for being brave enough to have this conversation." They finished their lunch in silence, a sense of peace settling between them. They had said their goodbyes, they had offered their forgiveness, and they were finally ready to move on. Chapter 15, Untangling the Web. In the months that followed, Emily focused on her own healing and growth. Working through her issues, her insecurities, and her patterns of behavior. She started writing again, pouring her heart and soul into her work. She wrote about her marriage, about her affair, about her journey of self-discovery. Her words were raw, honest, and deeply personal. She reconnected with Sarah, apologizing for her selfishness and recklessness. They rebuild their friendship, stronger and more resilient than before. Emily and Alex eventually realized that their relationship was based on shaky foundations. They were drawn together by a shared need for escape, for validation, for excitement, but they weren't truly in love. They decided to part ways amicably, wishing each other well. Alex moved to another city to pursue his art career, and Emily remained in town, determined to build a new life for herself. Years later, Emily was a successful author, her books resonating with readers around the world. She was single, independent, and content. She had untangled the web of lies and deception that had once ensnared her, and she was finally free to live her life on her own terms.